Hi everyone, I'm Joanna Penn from thecreativepenn.com and today I'm here with Nick Loper. Hi Nick!
Hi, Joanna. Thanks for having me.
No worries. So just as a little introduction, Nick is an entrepreneur, a non-fiction author and a podcaster at sidehustlenation.com and a sort of serial entrepreneur, multiple entrepreneur, I think, and we'll be talking about that as we go through. So Nick, start off by telling us a bit about Side Hustle Nation. What's the ethos and your own background?
Well, it stems from my background as a part-time entrepreneur, as a side hustle entrepreneur, trying to build a business up on the side as maybe an escape route from a corporate job, or just as a more productive way to spend your free time. And so it's kind of a lower risk brand of entrepreneurship. And I was just reading an article this morning about hobbies that cost you money versus hobbies that make you money. And book writing obviously is an example of a great hobby that has the potential to make you money.
Yeah, that's a good point. And the phrase side hustle, because people listen from all over the world to this show and may not have heard, you just go into that a bit more.
This is something you're doing to earn money outside of your day job. This is moonlighting in previous generations. Part-time entrepreneurship, part-time business.
Yeah.
Just basically something you're doing outside of work to try and pad your income a little bit.
Yeah, so tell us about what you do. Like, what is your side? Because are you just side hustling now? As in, you are actually full-time side hustling, or do you still have a day job?
I've been fortunate enough to be a full-time side hustler since 2008, I think. So it's been a few years, and it's been a lot of fun. My first side hustle was in affiliate marketing, and that's kind of been my, I guess, bread and butter for a lot of years. And although that's kind of diversifying now into the Kindle publishing game, into kind of some the blog and the podcast, which is trying to translate it into some mastermind hosting and kind of private coaching on for side hustle entrepreneurs. And that's been the really fun part about starting the blogs, trying to develop these new income streams, and we'll get into, I think, some of them a little bit later. But just experimenting with different stuff and seeing what happens, and kind of sharing the results of that, good, bad, or ugly. We've had some good case studies that have come out of it, and some not so good ones as well.
And what did you do before?
I was working corporate for Ford, the car company.
Oh, yeah. Oh, there you go. It's interesting. I always find it interesting. I think a lot of us who do this came out of big corporates, and really just wanted to do something a bit different. But one of the messages, I like the fact that you said that the side hustle was a kind of lower risk model, because what we're not saying here is ditch everything and start on day one. Like, how long did it take you working on the side before you could give up the day job?
For me, it was 3 years of nights and weekends. And so, this is not the kind of business that's probably going to go out and attract venture capital, or, be ringing the opening bell on the NASDAQ or something. But it's, hopefully we can kind of scale it up, incrementally over time.
It took me about 3 years as well
Oh, perfect.
of doing this particular business, although I'd started a number of other businesses before. So, and I think it's a really good message for people is, but authors as well can't expect to just release one book and make enough money to give up their day job. It just doesn't work like that. So you have like eight. I read you had a post reasonably recently, I think, which was my 8 revenue streams. So you mentioned affiliate stuff there. You mentioned your Kindle publishing. You mentioned podcast kind of sponsorship and mastermind things. What were some of the other ones on your revenue stream list?
There's a bunch of different stuff. So another thing I've been experimenting with is peer-to-peer lending, which is more of a, I guess, investment strategy, kind of similar to investment returns, maybe 10 to 15% returns on that, where you can kind of borrow money or lend money out to your peers who need it instead of going through a bank and stuff. So that's kind of cool. It's not huge, but it's kind of growing as the cash flow kind of comes back from that stuff. I've been experimenting a little bit on Fiverr in the past 12 months, and that's been kind of a fun one, because it's like, what could I sell for $4 actually, because they take a dollar cut out of each one. So that's been kind of fun. And I've been trying to sell some courses on Udemy as an online educator. and haven't really cracked the code on that, but it's another big platform. They've got a couple million users, a couple million students, and so I see some opportunity there, some potential there as well.
And what I like about this is, and I talk about with books, you need a number of books, multiple revenue streams on multiple platforms, so not just Amazon, you need iTunes, you need Kobo, you need ebooks, you need print books, you need audio books. And I see what you're doing, I see myself now as having these multiple streams. They're a bit more focused than your different streams. But, and I have public speaking and, that type of thing as well. And I think the message, I want the message of this podcast to be about multiple streams of income, right? So it doesn't really matter
Definitely.
if you're sorry, carry on.
You're right. It's a diversity play or diversification play. There's inherently going to be some risk when you rely on one source of income. And I learned this the hard way, even as an entrepreneur. The day after I quit my job, I turned in the keys to my company car, and that's the day that Google decided to essentially shut down my advertising account. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. For the last 2 years, you haven't had a single problem with this. It's been fine. Thousands of happy customers. And all of a sudden they say, well, this is not really what we're looking for anymore. And so that was a big, siren that went off and said, hey, look, buddy, you need to diversify not only your traffic streams, but your overall kind of portfolio of income. And people will reach out to me and say, well, isn't, starting a business is risky. And, you can kind of respond back, well, don't you think, relying on only one source of income, your job is a little bit risky too? What happens if that goes south?
Yeah, exactly. And it's
funny.
Look
at what Steve Scott has done, right? Just very disciplined, cranking out those 2,000 words a day and publishing a book. Almost every month he comes out with a new title. And it wasn't until earlier this year where he already had, probably 35 titles out where he really had a couple big hits that got to the top of Amazon. So it definitely goes to show the power of that portfolio strategy and kind of cross-selling. And, obviously he's very, very sharp author and wish him nothing but success. But it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Yeah, exactly. And we're going to have Steve on the show. So
awesome.
Later on this autumn. So that'll be fun. But I also wanted to sort of stress that you're not all about the money, are you? I mean, this is more of a personality. This is a lifestyle thing as well. What is the driver behind behind this side hustle business?
Well, this is more, and that's a good point, because it does focus on money and what money can afford you, right? It's like that financial freedom, that ability, I guess that option, the alternative to quit your job if you want to, that financial freedom, that independence. And I think it's a really empowering moment when somebody earns that first dollar outside of their day job. And it's even more empowering when that side hustle income starts to grow and even begins to eclipse it. If I can encourage that kind of, the creation, the connection, and the contribution that fuels this brand of entrepreneurship, I feel like that leads to happier people, healthier people, happier families, communities, countries, and so there's there's a big picture, a microeconomic and a macroeconomic view of it.
Yeah, and I feel the same way. To me, an entrepreneur creates value out of their head. And that's, what you're doing, coming up with ideas. That's what authors do, whether they write fiction or non-fiction. We're creating something out of our brains that didn't exist in the world before.
Exactly.
Which is so fulfilling. It's just a fulfilling thing. And I certainly still, after nearly 3 years full time, I'm probably only making about a third of what I made in my day job, but okay. I'm exponentially happier than I used to be. So there's a trade-off, isn't there? If you want to earn loads of money, probably working as a back at Ford or as a consultant or whatever, you can make better money straight off, but are you as happy, I guess?
Right. And what's the upside potential of it as well? You could go and probably get your MBA and be working corporate, and maybe you're working, 60, 70 hours a week. Or you can do something else, and maybe you're not making that same money, but, hopefully you're doing something that you genuinely care about and can make a living doing that way.
And what do you think? What have you learned? How did you go from being a corporate guy to being an entrepreneur? Were there things hurdles you had to get over to kind of to get into all this stuff?
That's a good question. And one of the biggest hurdles is having a cush corporate job. Like the more you earn, the harder it is to walk away. And I think that's a challenge for a lot of people. Say, hey, I don't want to give this up. And so that kind of breeds a culture of comfort, of complacency. So a little bit, maybe that plays into it a little bit. I don't know, just the challenges to overcome. I kind of trying to look at things as an experiment. And this is actually in a book called The Top 10 Distinctions Between Millionaires and the Middle Class. And what the author talks about is related to your attitude towards risk. He says, when you're evaluating an opportunity, you can say, what's the best case scenario? What's the if everything goes right, what's the best thing that can happen? What's the worst thing that can happen? And what's the most likely thing to happen? He says, if you can live with the worst thing and the most likely thing is positive, then maybe that's a bet worth taking, or that's a risk worth taking.
Yeah, and I think, well, for authors, it's funny because I wonder these days whether the worst thing for authors is whether you get really bad reviews or it just doesn't sell anything at all. Like those two things, which one would be the worst for your book? But did you have to learn about marketing? Because this was my biggest learning curve. I didn't know anything about marketing before I wrote my first book, and then rapidly realised that nobody cares what you do online, and you have to get noticed somehow. So did you have to learn internet marketing, and how did you kind of go about doing that?
Well, it's been an ongoing learning process really since I very first started, probably in 2005, 2006, and have been blessed with just running some experience. I started out on Google AdWords with a budget of $1 a day, just very I don't know what's going to happen, and then $5 a day, and then on up from there. So the same thing with writing the books. It's like you can put it out on Amazon, and that's awesome. It's a giant search engine with 100 million verified credit card accounts or whatever the figure is. But there's a certain push. Like there's keywords you can target and kind of do the best you can to optimize your cover and your description and your title and all that stuff. But ultimately, you got to do something to drum up the interest in it. And I'm sorry, I'm not a expert in the fiction world of how to market those books and gather reviews for that. But I imagine it's a completely different ballgame than the nonfiction world.
It is, but like you said, I think your attitude of playing and giving it a go and trying it out, that's the attitude, I think, because none of us know, and like you've experienced, things change all the time, and what worked last month doesn't necessarily work this month. So unless you're constantly playing and trying new things, you just don't move on, right?
But one of the funny things, I originally wrote my first book was on how to hire a virtual assistant. And I wrote that book as an authority builder for a website I had on the topic. I didn't expect to necessarily sell any copies, but I was like, I'm going to put it up for Amazon. People who come to my site will say, hey, he wrote the book on the subject. Obviously, he's somebody who should be trustworthy. I'll take what he says for what it's worth. But the surprising thing is almost all of the sales come through Amazon's own ecosystem. Like almost nobody buys it through the website, which was really, really surprising for me. So I think that kind of plays into the power of having something for sale on Amazon.
Absolutely. So tell us about just tell us broadly, what are your non-fiction books that you've got available right now?
So the virtual assistant one was the first one. Then I added one on the topic of treadmill desks. I think I have the honor of being the world's best-selling author on the topic of treadmill desks, which is not a very good distinction because it does not sell very many copies. But a very niche market that I apparently can stake my claim to. I wrote a book on the small business website checklist, which is, I think, 50 or so elements that a small business website should have or consider having. And that one stemmed out of my interest. Actually, on Fiverr, I was experimenting with some doing video site reviews for people. I said, hey, I'll turn on the screen recorder and just talk over your website for 5 minutes to give my observations. And there started to become a pattern after doing 100, 200 of these things. Like, okay, I should probably put the common findings or the common suggestions into book form and go from there. And so that one hasn't been a very good seller either, but it's it's another authority builder, another thing to have for sale up on Amazon. And then finally, just this summer was by far my best performing book. It's called Work Smarter, and it's a collection of online resources that entrepreneurs are using to be more productive and get more stuff done during the course of their day.
And which is the one that we connected over. And so tell me first up, how do you come up with the book titles and the topics that you're going to write on? How did you decide on those particular topics?
Well, this topic, the Work Smarter book in particular, I was listening to Entrepreneur on Fire, and at the end of every show, he asks, "What's your favorite internet resource?" And I was like, "Oh, this will make like a really viral blog post. This is gonna be awesome, right?" Like I sat down to compile all these answers. I actually had a virtual assistant service go through and kind of create the spreadsheet of going through all of the show notes archives. And as this passed 5,000 words, 10,000 words, it's like, okay, this is becoming more than just a blog post. Let's see if we could turn this into a book form. And that's when I reached out to John and reached out to Kate, and just to make sure that they were okay with that, and they loved the idea, and they did their part to promote it as well. And that book really led itself to a kind of grassroots campaign, because there were more than 500 contributors, yourself included, and more than 350 resources named. So I could reach out to all of those companies as well. So I probably sent out 800 emails over the course of that first week to, hey, you were cited in this book. It's free this week on Amazon if you want to check it out. And by the way, if you think this is a cool project, here's the link to share it.
Yeah, and that's why you're on my show, because I got the email and I was like, and I do quite a lot of people, I get quite a lot of emails with people saying they've cited me, but your book was actually really interesting as well. So, and I reckon people should check it out. So, Work Smarter by Nick Loper on Amazon, and it really does have like hundreds of tips and tools in. And what's funny is I was going through it because I like the productivity stuff too, and I was like going through it, and then I was like, do you know what? There are so many in here that I now have about 25 new things that I want to check out. So I wanted to ask you first, out of that whole book, did you come away personally with any things that you went, yep, that's my standout couple of things?
Well, just tons of new stuff. Like I guarantee you'll find something you've never heard of in there. And I found dozens of them. And I'm trying to think of, even on the writing side, Scrivener was a really popular one, or something I had never really used before. OhmWriter was another one. A bunch of tools for writer, kind of content creator stuff. People were really high on some of the graphic editing ones, which I think have like PicMonkey and Canva were popular choices for kind of creating these shareable images for Pinterest, for your blog. I think those were pretty powerful. Now, a couple of the ones that I used to create the book, or Fancy Hands is the name of the virtual assistant service that I used. They were probably used 20 hours worth of their service to go through and compile all these resources, categorize them, write the descriptions, find out about pricing, translate this massive 500-row spreadsheet into paragraph and sentence form. They were really, really integral in writing this book. And for everybody who's listening, like, this is not, the world's best piece of literature or the great American novel or anything. It's essentially a list, with descriptions and stuff. But yeah, I guarantee you'll find something new that you can use in there.
Well, that's the thing. It's useful, and it taps into that productivity kind of hacking idea, which is, why it's so effective. And obviously I'll talk more with Steve Scott around his type of, because he does the same type of thing. But so what I wanted to check again was your process for writing. So your idea was to get Fancy Hands to get the stuff off Entrepreneur on Fire, create
Right.
a spreadsheet, and then you also got them to turn that into a list on Word,
Right.
and then they did the cover as well.
Sure. So for the cover of the book, was going to go out to Fiverr and have some covers made. I've had some success there in the past. So I made a mock-up in PowerPoint, and I was about to send this off and have some kind of next draft concepts made when my wife was like, let me take a crack at this. And she's a PowerPoint whiz, and so she made the cover for it, and I made a couple extra tweaks at the end. I was like, this looks good to me. Let's run with it. I guess I probably should have some data on split testing or something like that, but it seemed to sell okay, with the cover that it had.
Yeah, so how many copies are we talking about?
So it moved 20,000 free units during that first promo week, and it's probably sold 1,500 or 2,000 since then.
In how many weeks as we're recording?
It's been 2 months since going live.
Yeah, good. So that's a pretty decent thing for something that. I'm just trying to work out. Did you actually write anything yourself in it, apart from the kind of introduction, or was it mainly constructed from the virtual assistants?
Well, they built the foundation of it, and I would love to be able to say like, oh, they wrote the whole thing, but unfortunately that was not the case. I did spend probably a couple weeks of going through editing all that they wrote, and then expanding on that to make to add my kind of personal stamp to it.
Yeah, no, well, I got that impression. I was just checking, because I think it's a very well put together book, and the reason it's popular is because it answers questions and it's very targeted. So I think that's great. But what I want people to kind of get from this is that with non-fiction, you can just come up with this idea, right? And you didn't know all of that stuff beforehand.
Right, I had no special qualifications to write this book. I was just the curator or the compiler, essentially. So anybody probably could have had similar or better success than me. So
no,
I'm kind of. It makes me curious what other similar ideas or giant list books could be created along the same vein.
I think it's like I've got right here. I'll wave it. This. I just printed it. Is my the manuscript for my book on business for authors, and I've been writing this for like a year on and off.
Oh, cool!
Like seriously, a year, and it's just really it's been really intense. And I'm like, goodness, I need to get a bit more, I guess, a bit more in flow around ideas. What I get from you is, you come up with a lot of ideas and you're not afraid to just try them and fail miserably or do all right or do quite well, I imagine, on some of your ideas.
This one was obviously a hit. Lots of other, the small business checklist book has not moved very many copies at all. So it's, there's ups and downs. So lessons learned along the way as well.
But you're not afraid of that. That seems to be the key.
Right. And I actually, for that title, I actually tried to outsource the writing of it, which was another, miserable experiment altogether. I got all these bids back on Elance and stuff, and this lady sounded like she was going to be fine. And, it wasn't the lowest bid, somewhere in the middle. But, came back and was like, okay, you're clearly not a native English speaker. This has no voice. So I had to scrap the whole thing, and my version ended up being twice as long. And so that was, I probably still haven't broken even on the investment on that, but it was, lesson learned.
Yeah, no, it's good to hear as well, because, I think this is the reality with books. Like I have one that's called Career Change, that originally had another title, How to Enjoy Your Job, which I've had out now for 4 years, I think, and it sold like miserably. It sells every January when people type in career change.
Okay.
But it's like, that was the book I just really needed to write for my own life. But no, I also, let's talk about that standing desk book, because another aspect of this is presumably you've written this book because you have a standing desk, right?
Yes. We saw, I think it was on like IKEA Hackers or something, the idea of a treadmill desk. And so I was I'm working from home and just sitting, and you read all the data that says sitting is killing you, and on and on and on. It's more deadly than smoking, whatever, all of the data to suggest that it's like really bad. And so, okay, let's build this treadmill desk. I went out on Craigslist, found a used treadmill, went out on Craigslist, found a taller desk, went over to my buddy's house who had a little jigsaw, so we were able to cut out a hole for the instrument panel and stuff. So the whole thing was $250, I think. It was really, really affordable. You can go out and buy like top of the line ones for like $4,000. They're meant for, if mine was in like a professional corporate office, it would not fly. So there's some that actually like are made for, real office environments, very, very quiet running motors and all that stuff. But I've been on it for 2.5 years and absolutely love it. Like, should have built it years ago. It's my first thing, routine in the morning, bang out, 3 or 4 miles before breakfast. And you just kind of, I find it's a little bit of a productivity hack because there's some inertia, like physical and maybe mental inertia. Like, I'm moving forward. It's a conscious effort to like make it stop and get off of the thing versus, if I'm just sitting here, it's a little bit easier to get distracted.
Wow. No, I think that's very cool. And so you wrote a book on something that you were an expert in, or you are an expert in, because you do that yourself. And I think this is going to grow. I think that area is growing because I've heard a lot about standing desk and walking desk and everything recently. I think it's becoming more popular.
Well, maybe that'll translate into some more book sales. And what was fun about that one was the success story. So I reached out on Help a Reporter and a couple others to try and find some case studies of people who had lost huge amounts of weight just by adding this into their daily routine, just by walking an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours a day. And it was really, really inspiring. Some very life-changing stories that came out of it.
Wow. And it's one of those things that I really want to do, but I'm one of those people who doesn't own any furniture at all. I rent everything, and we live in this tiny flat. And there's no way I can fit that in here.
Yeah, but you could do the standing desk probably. That would take up less space.
I have a Swiss ball. I roll around and do like back stretches and stuff on my Swiss ball. I can do a back bend off it. I'm bouncing on it right now, you see. But just switching to the Swiss ball, which is like $8, right, to get a Swiss ball, completely got rid of my back pain.
Oh, wow. Well, that's awesome.
Yeah, so there's another little health hack, and I've got a load of people on them now, and it's just brilliant. So, all good. So are you going to write more nonfiction? Are you, given that you evaluate all of your different side hustles, do you think that nonfiction on Kindle is a good business?
Well, it's definitely big. Like I said, I started out just with the intent as an authority builder, but it's turned into a nice little side hustle. Income over the past couple years, really nothing amazing until just this summer as the Work Smarter book has kind of taken off a little bit. I'm trying to figure out what the next title would be. I've got a couple that are maybe a third written or half written, but I don't feel like they're ready for prime time yet. I need to add some more case studies to them or something like that. Beef them up a little bit before they're ready to go.
And interesting, you mentioned Help a Reporter. Is it .org?
I don't know. Anyway. Google Help a Reporter.
Because I used to subscribe to that as you can subscribe as asking or receiving the. And there were just so many emails, I stopped subscribing. But tell us a bit more about how you've researched your book. So that's one of them. You've used that to find people. What else have you been doing for research?
That's been the prime. Like, if you need a specific quote or story or somebody to highlight, that's probably been the most effective. Other than, you can go out and try and Google for people. So I found a couple of companies that had inserted or implemented treadmill desks in their office, just through press releases and news reports and stuff, because it was like a newsworthy thing. Like, oh, we have a ergonomic work environment for our people, and we have a bank of 4 treadmill desks, and you can punch in and punch out and stuff like that. Fancy Hands, like I said, was really integral in research for this last project. And just kind of through networking. Like if you have an interesting story to tell, or like you can connect to somebody else, that may trigger something else. And that's actually probably what I use Help a Reporter more for on a day-to-day basis. Even if there's something I can't reply to, I'll find something that sparks somebody I know, and so I'll forward it off to them, and they're always grateful for, like, I'll say press opportunity for such and such a company, or such and such a this sounds like a good fit, like why don't you respond to this. And so that's been a networking hack lately.
Yeah, and I think for me that networking side is so important, and that's why I like my podcast as well. I don't know, because you have a podcast too. Is that part of your networking hack as well?
That's probably the best. That's probably the best side benefit of having the show is having an excuse to talk to awesome and inspiring people on a weekly basis, and it takes the same amount of time and money to produce a podcast if 10 people are listening or if 10,000 people are listening. So some very, very powerful opportunities to scale up on that side of things.
And then just on marketing, obviously with Work Smarter, you did a lot of personal emails, which was hardcore and very effective, which I'm totally impressed with. And, as I've said, that's why you're on the show, because I was like, I need to do that. That's exactly what I need to do. But that was good. What else are you doing around marketing for your books and your business?
For the book marketing, I did, so the email outreach was the primary campaign, and it was kind of to encourage downloads, encourage social sharing. Like I tried a bunch of different stuff, all of the, check the box kind of marketing tactics, submit to the free, the free author site, or the free Kindle promo site, submit to the free Kindle Facebook groups. I went out and for this one, trying to find on LinkedIn some groups that were related to productivity and online entrepreneurship, and kind of share the book in there with them. I don't know if that related, or I don't know if that translated to any sales, but that was an effort anyways. I reached out on Quora, or I had somebody look on Quora for me to see if anybody was asking questions related to, hey, what are your favorite internet resources? What are your favorite apps or productivity tools? And so I answered a few questions there, and just said, tried to, name a few of my favorites, and then just say, hey, by the way, this book is free on Amazon this week if you want. It's all an effort to kind of drive up the download numbers to, get exposure and reviews.
No, which is brilliant. And then what about your business specifically? I guess, the Side Hustle website. So you've got the podcast, for example, which is a traffic mechanism, I suppose. What else? Like blogging. Do you find blogging to be effective for everything you do?
Every now and again, you'll have a post that seems to resonate and do well. The rest of the time, it can be kind of frustrating. You're like, I spent 6 hours writing this, and it got 3 tweets or something. You're like, what's the point of this? But the podcast is actually growing probably 3 times faster than the blog. So that's probably my number one source of discovery for new side hustlers, new members of the tribe.
Podcasting is so hot right now, isn't it? It's just going off.
It's been pretty good. Like guest posting has kind of been repeated over and over again. I mean, it's tried and true, so I guess I don't have much to add to that. I had a post on Steve Scott's site this week or last week,
great.
Which was good. I know he's got a pretty rabid following.
Yeah, and that post it breaks down what you did to get the 20,000 downloads, didn't it? Basically. Yeah,
the book is, or the post could be a book on itself. Somebody told me it's 5,000 words. Everything step by step, what I did to launch the book.
Yeah, and I'll link to that in the show notes. It's great. And you didn't use BookBub for that, did you?
No, I don't even know what BookBub is.
Oh, look, I've taught you something. BookBub is the number one book advertising email list that you.
Oh.
Yeah, so you should definitely, and you can advertise. And when you use BookBub, so you can pay for if you have a book on free or cheap. So the last time I did it, I got 50,000 downloads from one email, which cost me about $250 US. So
Oh my God.
Yeah. So yeah.
So could you do it for a countdown deal? Like if I put it at 99 cents, you could
I imagine
promote it
so.
after that?
I'm not exclusive on Amazon, so I don't do the countdowns. But
Okay.
yeah, BookBub is basically the sort of number one thing we recommend spending money on in terms of book advertising. Oh, I'm surprised you didn't know about that.
I'm taking notes. I'm taking notes. Yeah, that's pretty cheap advertising, all things
Well,
considered.
it depends. The price depends on which list. So the non-fiction list is cheaper, and also whether the book is free or whether it's paid. So if it's so for example, you can be paying like 800 US for some of their lists if your book is just reduced, but you get you make some money back if your book isn't free. So but anyway, but bookbub.com. Definitely subscribe to it as a reader and see what they do. They're very, very picky, but given that you now have you've got a nice cover, you've got reviews, you just have to submit, and they reject a lot of people, but eventually you can usually get on.
Okay, cool.
There you
I'll
go,
check it out.
little tip. So two more things I wanted to ask you. First up, the Fiverr experiment that sold more books than KDP or something. Tell me about
Oh,
that.
sure. So initially, my early days on Fiverr, I talked to a guy for the podcast last year who had earned enough money on Fiverr in a 12-month period to buy a house with his Fiverr earnings. So I was like, okay, I gotta check this out. I gotta try this out. But I was hesitant to put anything that was going to require my time investment until then I got brave and did the video thing. So I started out with a couple books for sale, and the virtual assistant book was the first one that I put up there. Let the KDP select expire and put it up there. And in that first month, in that first 60 days, like it was outselling Amazon. I don't know how or why, which is probably a sad it's a sad figure because it wasn't setting any bestseller records on Amazon. I should clarify. But it was like, here's another outlet. Here's another avenue for authors, and never really considered it before, but it turned out to be a pretty good one. And now I'm selling the website checklist book on there as well, and doing the video reviews as an upsell on or a gig extra on that one.
And Fiverr, if anyone doesn't know, is Fiverr with an extra R on the end, isn't it? Fiverr. Yeah. And I've been on there, and basically the idea is to have an upsell. So if you just have a book, do you think it's worth doing if you just have a book?
Well, I think so. It's it doesn't take but 2 minutes to log in and deliver it. So, and that's the thing; it's not automated like Amazon. A couple of advantages, it's a higher royalty, but I guess the disadvantage is you're set at $5, so you're always going to get 80% of that $5 order versus 70%. You don't get an email address, but you get the Fiverr username, and so you can message people on the Fiverr platform. So it's a little bit of an opportunity if you have complementary products or services that might make sense to reach out to people after the fact. And it's just a more personal connection because you're doing that personal email to each customer that orders. You go on and record a video. You hold up the book and say, hey, I'm Nick. I'm the author of this. This is going to help you do X, Y, and Z. Buy it now, and you can point to the button and stuff.
Yeah, no, that's cool. I actually might have a go at that. That's when I was reading your post on it. I was like, because the impression of Fiverr is like, oh, what can you get for a $5? But actually, most of our books are under a $5.
Right. And so far, and so a lot of these titles, they're $2.99 at Amazon, but they're $5 on Fiverr. So far, nobody's complained.
No, exactly, because it's a different audience. And I mean, once you use Fiverr or People Per Hour or whatever, you end up going on there to look to see what's there. You almost shop there, don't you? Going, oh, that looks like something I could use.
It's my first stop for any sort of outsourcing idea, or because it's so so cheap, so low risk. Like even for WordPress kind of site tweaks and stuff lately, there's a guy on there who's got like thousands and thousands of reviews, and just it's a little bit weird to give him your WordPress login information, but it's like, look, I want this button to be over here, and I can't figure out how to mess with the with the coding for it, and he's like, you're super fast, and it's like, hey, it's done for you.
Wow. No, and that's the thing. And people listening, look at Fiverr, look at people per hour for all of these things. Like half the time it's better to outsource stuff that it will take you forever, right? Than trying to do it yourself.
Yeah, I could have, in the fancy hands example, again, like I could have spent hours, I would have done it on my treadmill desk. I would have at least been getting some exercise. But, very, very tedious task of going through 500 plus, episodes and making the spreadsheet and doing all that work.
No, that is a really good point. I've thought, because this will be 191, I think, podcast episode for
Wow.
me. I know, and I keep thinking, for number 200, I should give like the top tips I've learned over 200 podcasts. And then I'm like, but then I'll have to go back through 200 podcasts. And try and work out what I learned. So I might not do that, but I did.
I did it for episode 50. It was a little bit easier.
Yeah, when you get to, I should have done it at 50, 100, 150, and then I could have just. So there's a tip for you: keep doing it on the 50.
Okay.
So the other thing I finally wanted to ask you before we finish. One of the things that we talk about as authors is the author brand and about focus. And one of the things that strikes me about your many, many income streams is it's not very focused. So in a way, you've got diversity, but you're not really focused. So how do you feel about that? And is that a strategy, or is that just you as a person?
That's a very good question, and I would say the focus is on the larger picture. Like the focus is on building non-job income streams, and the tactical, like boots on the ground, how that happens is going in 10 different directions. So I don't know what's next. I'm kind of in between projects right now, trying to figure out what the next experiment may be. Whether that's a book or whether that's doubling down on the Udemy stuff, or trying to build, a course or something for the Side Hustle Nation audience or something like that.
But you're having fun.
It's all been a blast. That's, yeah, we'll leave it at that. It's been a ton of fun.
Yeah, and I think I really like your attitude around all of this, and I think just trying stuff. I think a lot of authors have a almost an imposter syndrome, like, I can't possibly do this, I'm not worthy, I can't even try this because I don't have 8 degrees in this topic. And I like what you do because you're just giving it a go, and some of it works, and that's brilliant. It's a great attitude.
Yeah, you never know until you try, and like you said, like if you're the author that's second guessing your authority to write this book, that's going to come out in your work. So you have to, by publishing, you become the authority, and so you have to keep that in mind as you go through the writing process.
Fantastic. Right, so where can people find you and your books and your products and your podcast and everything?
The best way to find me is at sidehustlenation.com. There'll be a link to the podcast over there. The books are all on Amazon. If you just look Nick Loper, you should be able to find them there.
Brilliant. Thanks so much for your time, Nick. That was great.
Thanks for having me.